This week's movie is Dead Man's Wire. Dead Man's Wire takes place in 1977, following this true story of Tony Kitisis as he enters the offices of Meridian Mortgage Company to meet with President Richard Hall and takes him hostage with a shotgun wired to both him and Richard's necks, known as the Dead Man's Wire or the Dead Man Line. Any attempt for Richard to run or the police to take out Tony would result in the shotgun going off. Dead Man's Wire stars Bill Skarsgård as Tony Kitisis, Dacre Montgomery as Richard Hall, Al Pacino as M.L. Hall, Coleman Domingo as the disc jockey Fred Temple, and Miala as the reporter Linda Page, who are some of the main characters in the movie. It is directed by Gus Van Sant, whose previous work includes Milk, Psycho, and probably best well known as the director of Good Will Hunting. So the movie primarily follows Tony as he makes his way to Meridian Bank in order to meet with M.L. Hall initially, but he ends up meeting with his son, Richard Hall. And in their meeting, Tony hands what Richard thinks is a blueprint for some kind of land development. Unbeknownst to him, he unrolls the paper, and it's a schematic for wiring up a shotgun to him and Tony. And so once Tony indicates why he's there in regards to he wants an apology, he feels he's been wronged by this dying deal, especially from M.L. Hall, who's played by Al Pacino. Tony's plan is to take Richard back to his apartment, and that's where he wants to handle the hostage negotiations. And so the movie follows them as they make their way back to Tony's apartment, which he has wired up with explosives to avoid anybody from going inside. That includes the windows, the doors. And so when the cops are following them to this apartment complex, one of the detectives, which I didn't know while watching the movie, all I knew was whoever played him kind of chose a weird accent. And that was one thing that I found, that the accents weren't consistent across characters in this movie. I don't know, if they're all native born in Indiana or not, but Carrie Elways, I guess, did a great job because I didn't know it was Carrie Elways. Plays the one detective who's kind of initializing the hostage negotiations until the brass show up. And so they make their way into the apartment, and Tony sets up Richard at the table with the shotgun still pointing at his face. And throughout this whole endeavor, Richard is kind of traumatized. And I think Dacre does a great job of representing that. He doesn't have a lot to work with, I don't think, in regards to the dialogue in the movie. He has a lot of short answers when he's speaking to Tony, also when he's on the phone with other people in regards to some of the negotiations that are going on. But I think he did a great job in regards to being someone who's traumatized in a scenario like that. So the movie basically takes place primarily in Tony's apartment, with footage being cutting it out with news reporters, people interviewing Tony's family, people that know Tony around the neighborhood. And there was some interesting aspects of using just still images in certain areas of the film. I noticed that initially when they were leaving the bank, as they're walking out, it does a still frame, black and white, of Tony and Richard leaving the bank, and it's the actors and the people in the movie. They don't use actual footage from that time in the actual stuff that was filmed and presented at a time in this movie, except towards the end when they do the typical discuss what happened to the characters in the outro credits. But overall, I think outside of those still frames, I think they did a good sense of making the movie feel like the 70s and giving that vibe of a 70s film. There were some interesting things in regards that kind of took me out of it. This is, I don't know, it's a weekday morning. The bank or mortgage place is open, and they're driving, and there's like nobody on the streets in this downtown area. And as they're making their way to the apartment, there's a lot of empty streets. It's like, where's everybody at in this time? Which is interesting because there's some footage from the actual events that, if you go back and watch, there's definitely a lot more traffic and stuff out there. So I thought that was an interesting way of presenting it in the film itself, making it super hyper-focused and really just sticking to the characters in the film. So during these investigations in the apartment, Tony has a fondness for the local radio DJ played by Coleman Domingo, who he kind of sees as someone that can be his voice to get the story straight and counter what the narrative is from the news media of him being a crazy person just taking someone hostage. And so he has a number of conversations with Fred Temple, the disc jockey, who then presents it over the air. And Tony kind of gets a kick out of this. Like, he enjoys that aspect of it. And Tony is pretty hospitable to Richard for the most part, outside of having him tied up with a gun, obviously. He offers Tony food and water and tries to make him as comfortable as possible in the situation that he put him in. A lot of the movie is how they're going to get Tony to agree to let Richard live. One of the points was getting a confession or apology from ML Hall, who's played by Al Pacino, to say, yeah, he did wrong Tony in regards to this deal. It's always super unclear if Tony was actually wronged or not. He sees he was wronged. The banks say they didn't, do anything to stop any developers from building on the land and having Tony, be able to lease out the property for development projects. It's all kind of unclear exactly why he is super upset about it. He just feels like he's super wrong because nobody wants to develop on the land. There's a small conversation of him saying he's doing something for the people, which isn't super clear, and they don't really go too deep into it. It's as if he's trying to appease to like the lower income communities and provide services to the people who don't usually have a lot of services at this time. So that's like hinted at in one conversation. But I think one of the weakest parts of this movie is Al Pacino. I did not like him in this movie. He had a weird accent. From what I was reading, I think he only shot for one day for the film, which kind of makes sense in regards to how much he's in the movie. But I didn't think he did a great job in the movie, and they probably could have just left him out entirely. And then Mayala is a reporter who happens to be in the area when Tony and Richard are making their way to Richard's car to go back to Tony's apartment. So she kind of gets her crew involved, even though they're kind of the B team for the local news station. She tries to take over and make sure that she gets the story or the scoop. So that way, her and her team are the ones reporting on this news story, prove and make their careers better. So the movie overall, I think, was a good crime thriller, not documentary, but based on true story. I thought the cast was overall pretty good outside of Al Pacino, and Cary Elwes was, even though he used a weird accent, was really good in the role he played. And the film definitely gave some 70s vibes. So overall, I'd recommend this to anybody who likes a good, based on true story film that's well made. Kind of gives that vibe of the 70s. Kind of puts you in a time and place that's a little different to now. So definitely give this one a 3 stars. Highly recommend seeing it at some point, whether it's in the theater or at home. I don't think you'll have a bad experience watching this movie. And that is A Dead Man's Wire.